The forest was dark, too dark. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Every step she took seemed to echo in the silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath.
Its edges are crumbling. The map, old and fragile, seemed to disintegrate a little more with each passing moment. She could barely make out the faded lines and symbols that marked her path.
She shivered. A cold wind howled through the trees, sending shivers down her spine. The forest seemed to whisper secrets, its voice carried on the wind. She pulled her cloak tighter around her, trying to ward off the chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. The map was her only guide. She had to find the place it marked. It was important, more important than anything she had ever done. The map spoke of a hidden treasure, a secret that had been passed down through generations. Her grandmother had entrusted her with this mission, and she couldn't let her down. It was important. The weight of her responsibility pressed down on her, making her steps feel heavier. She had to succeed, not just for herself, but for her family.
Her grandmother had told her so. The stories of the forest had been passed down through the generations, each one more terrifying than the last. But her grandmother had always spoken of the treasure with a glint in her eye, a promise of something wonderful. She had to be brave. The forest was testing her, pushing her to her limits. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Not when she was so close.
Rana pushed through the undergrowth. The branches and leaves seemed to reach out to grab her, trying to hold her back. But she fought through, determined to reach her destination. Thorns tore at her clothes. But she didn't stop. The pain was a reminder of her mission, a sign that she was on the right path. She had to keep going, no matter what. She had to keep going. The map was very old. It had been in her family for generations, a relic of a time long past. The symbols on it were mysterious, their meanings lost to time, but she knew that they held the key to her success. It spoke of a secret. The forest grew darker. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches forming a cage, but she couldn't let fear take hold. She had to stay focused, to keep moving forward. She felt a presence. Someone, or something, was watching her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up and she quickened her pace. She couldn't afford to be caught. Not now. Rana quickened her pace. She had to find the place. The map had led her this far and she couldn't turn back now. She had to reach her destination before it was too late, before it found her. The forest seemed to close in around her, its shadows growing deeper, but she wouldn't let fear stop her. She had a mission to complete and she would see it through to the end. The map led her deeper into the forest. Each step she took seemed to echo in the eerie silence, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the only sound in the oppressive atmosphere. The trees grew denser, their branches intertwining above her, blocking out the sunlight and casting long, sinister shadows on the forest floor to a place where the sun never reached. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, watching her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. It was hard to breathe. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat a reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows.
It shows a path, a narrow, winding trail that seemed to disappear into the darkness ahead. She traced the lines on the map with her finger, trying to make sense of the ancient symbols and markings. A path leading to a cave hidden behind a waterfall. The thought of finding the cave filled her with a mix of excitement and dread. What secrets did it hold? And what dangers awaited her there?
Her heart pounded. She could feel the weight of the map in her hand, its edges worn and frayed from years of use. This was no ordinary map. It was a guide to something ancient and powerful. Could this be the place? The path ahead was shrouded in mist, the trees on either side looming like silent sentinels. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. As she got closer, she heard something, a low hum. It was faint at first, barely audible over the sound of her own breathing, but as she moved deeper into the forest, it grew louder, resonating through the trees like a distant chant. It vibrated in the air. The sound seemed to come from all around her, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. She could feel it in her bones, a deep, thrumming pulse that set her nerves on edge. A shiver ran down her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the chill that had settled in her bones. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees pressing closer, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. This was a place of secrets and danger. She could feel it in the air, a palpable sense of foreboding that made her skin crawl. Every instinct told her to turn back, to leave this place and never return, but she couldn't, not now. She pushed aside the leafy vines. They were thick and heavy, their leaves slick with moisture. As she parted them, she caught a glimpse of something beyond, a flash of movement that made her heart skip a beat. The waterfall crashed down in front of her. The sound was deafening, a roaring torrent that filled the air with mist and spray. She could feel the cool droplets on her skin, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat of the forest. Hidden behind it was an opening, a cave. The entrance was dark and foreboding, the shadows within seeming to shift and move as she watched. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The map had led her right to it. She could hardly believe it. After all the trials and dangers, she had finally found the cave. But what lay within? Only time would tell. Rana hesitated. She felt a chill run down her spine as she stood at the cave entrance. The darkness inside seemed to beckon her, whispering secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the fear that gripped her. She had come this far, and turning back now was not an option. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Something was wrong, but she had come too far. The determination in her eyes was evident, masking the fear that lurked beneath. She had a mission, and she couldn't afford to fail. The cave's entrance loomed before her, a gaping maw that seemed to swallow all light. She took a deep breath and stepped behind the waterfall. The roar of the water was deafening, but it provided a momentary distraction from the dread that filled her. The cool mist from the waterfall clung to her skin, adding to the chill she felt. The cave was dark and damp. The air was thick with moisture, making it hard to breathe. Every step she took echoed in the cavernous space, amplifying the silence that surrounded her. The walls glistened with moisture, reflecting the faint light that managed to penetrate the darkness. Water dripped from the ceiling, creating a rhythmic sound that was both soothing and unsettling. Each droplet seemed to mark the passage of time, reminding her of the urgency of her mission. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. She fumbled for her flashlight and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the cave's interior. Shadows danced on the walls, creating eerie shapes that seemed to move and shift. The light was a small comfort in the overwhelming darkness. The beam danced across the cave walls, illuminating the path ahead. She moved cautiously, aware of every sound and movement. The cave seemed to come alive under the flashlight's beam, revealing its secrets, one by one. The air was thick with the smell of decay. It was a pungent odor that made her gag, but she pressed on. The cave was old, and it had seen many things over the years. The decaying organic matter was a testament to its age and the secrets it held. The floor was uneven and treacherous. She had to watch her step, careful not to trip over the rocks and debris that littered the ground. Each step was a challenge, but she was determined to move forward. Rana moved cautiously, her heart pounding. The further she went, the more anxious she became. The cave seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing in on her. She could feel the weight of the darkness, and it was almost suffocating. What would she find in this place? The question echoed in her mind, fueling her fear and curiosity. The cave was a mystery, and she was determined to uncover its secrets, but at what cost? She couldn't help but wonder if she was making a mistake.
A soft chuckle. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She wasn't alone. The sound echoed in the cave, bouncing off the walls and creating an eerie effect.
It seemed to come from the shadows. The darkness seemed to come alive, and she could feel eyes watching her. The forest outside the cave was silent, adding to the sense of isolation and fear. Rana froze. She was not alone. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her heart raced, and she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had to stay calm, but it was easier said than done. Someone was in the cave with her. The thought was terrifying, but she couldn't let fear control her. She had to find out who or what was in the cave. She took a deep breath and steeled herself for whatever lay ahead.
Who's there?
Only silence answered her. Rana shone her flashlight around the cave, but the shadows hid everything. She took a step back, her hands shaking. She had a bad feeling about this. Maybe she should leave, turn around and run. But something drew her deeper into the cave. A strange compulsion. She couldn't turn back now. Not yet. The air grew colder. Her breath formed clouds in front of her face. And then she saw him. A figure standing in the shadows. He was tall and thin with long, dark hair. His eyes glowed red in the darkness. The man stepped into the light. His face was pale and gaunt. He looked ancient, like he hadn't seen the sun in centuries.
Who are you?
Rana asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man smiled. It was a cruel, humorless smile. It sent shivers down her spine.
You may call me Draven.
He said, his voice a dry rasp.
And this
He gestured around the cave.
is my home.
Rana's eyes widened. Draven's words confirmed her suspicions. This man was no ordinary human. He was something else, something sinister.
What do you want?
Rana asked, backing away.
I've been expecting you, Rana. You see, I need something from you, something you possess.
Rana's hand went to her pocket, clutching the old map. She knew instinctively that this was what Draven was after. But why? What was so special about this map?
What are you talking about?
Rana asked, trying to sound brave. But her voice betrayed her fear.
Don't play coy with me, child. I know you have it, the map. Give it to me.
Rana knew she couldn't reason with him. This was a creature of darkness, a predator she had to fight.
She pulled a silver penknife from her pocket. It was small, but it was all she had. She held it out in front of her, her hand trembling.
You think that pitiful thing can harm me?
Draven sneered. He lunged at her, his eyes blazing. Rana ducked and rolled out of the way. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. She had to get to the entrance, to the light. Rana ran. She dodged the stalactites and stalagmites that jutted out from the cave floor. Her lungs burned, but she didn't dare slow down, not with Draven on her tail. She could hear him behind her, his heavy footsteps echoing in the darkness. She risked a glance over her shoulder. Draven was closer now, and his eyes, they were glowing even brighter. He lunged again, his hand outstretched. Rana screamed and threw herself to the side. She felt his claws graze her arm, tearing through her jacket. Rana stumbled out of the cave and into the night. She didn't stop running until she reached the edge of the forest. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. She looked back at the dark silhouette of the trees. Had she imagined it all? The cave, the vampire, the chase. But then she saw it, a faint red glow in the distance. Draven's eyes. He was still there, watching her, waiting. Rana knew she was not safe, not entirely. The vampire was still out there, and he would not rest until he had what he wanted.